Next, we will have Gerald Yam. He will be briefing everyone on economic policy, population and immigration, and public housing. Gerald.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. Despite record economic growth in 2010, the situation is not so rosy for many lower and middle-income Singaporeans. The PAP government's preoccupation with economic growth has led to the opening of floodgates to foreign workers to boost low-wage labor inputs, and this has suppressed the wages of many Singaporeans. The Workers' Party is committed to economic growth where the fruits of growth are equally distributed, where each citizen is provided opportunities to contribute to the best of their abilities and to live a dignified life. We need to lessen our reliance on GLCs and MNCs to drive our economy. These entities have a tendency to crowd out local entrepreneurs. Instead, we should focus more on nurturing homegrown enterprises. We should encourage our best talents to start companies or work in local enterprises. One way would be to reduce the number of government scholarships with service bonds. Recipients of some of these scholarships could be required to work in Singapore, but not necessarily in the civil service, for a number of years. This could include setting up their own companies. This will better spread local talent to the private sector and get more top students to think beyond working in the public sector. To grow local enterprises, the government, as one of the largest buyers of services, should strive to give local SMEs a fair chance at contracts, rather than choosing GLCs or MNCs because they are perceived to be the safe option. The government should seek to attract more venture capital firms to Singapore because VCs not only provide funding for promising startups, they also provide important managerial expertise and mentorship to guide our entrepreneurs. High rentals and land prices impact the cost of doing business. Effective measures to curb property and land speculation must be implemented and continually reviewed. I'll now move on to the next chapter on population and immigration. Strong population controls were put in place in the 1970s. These caused the birth rate to plummet to replacement level by as early as 1975. Yet it was not until the mid-1980s that the government made an about turn on its birth control policies. This has contributed to our current low birth rate and aging population problem. To mitigate this, the government liberalized immigration and foreign worker policies, growing the population by more than 1 million in just the past 10 years. This huge influx of new arrivals has contributed to overcrowding in our public transport system and in our hospitals, just to name a few. The Workers' Party is not an anti-immigrant party. We welcome immigrants who contribute to the economic vibrancy and diversity of our nation. However, we believe that the rate of immigration should not exceed the capacity of the country's infrastructure and the comfort level of our local population. The overall rate of immigration should be moderated to allow for the nation's infrastructure development to catch up with the huge population increase in the past decade. To increase our local fertility rate, we need to lower workplace and career impediments to childbearing and child rearing. Material incentives are not enough to encourage Singaporeans to have more children. A sense of nationhood and belonging, a vision and a hope for the future, and a less stressful schooling and working environment are essential to encouraging procreation. This might also stem the flow of Singaporeans emigrating. There should be increased support and stronger incentives for employers to implement better work-life balance practices and flexi-work arrangements. The civil service should set the example for the private sector to follow. To recognize the important role of fathers in sharing the responsibilities of infant care, paternity leave of at least 6 days, half of which will be funded by the government, should be introduced and legislated. All overseas Singaporeans should be allowed to vote in elections by postal votes, as is done in many advanced democracies. This will save them the effort of traveling to the designated Singapore overseas missions, which could be thousands of kilometers away from where they reside. Facilitating their involvement in the electoral process will help them to remain more engaged and feel a greater stake in Singapore, even while they are abroad. I'll now move on to my last chapter on public housing. The rapid increase in the cost of public housing in the past 10 years have far exceeded inflation and wage growth in Singapore. This has placed a heavy strain on many Singaporeans who are in need of housing. It could lead to some couples deferring childbearing, which could have a knock-on effect on our already low birth rates. The PAP continues to insist that HDB flats are affordable because the majority of lessees use less than 30% of their income to pay for their mortgages. However, this argument is flawed, as it does not take into account the length of the loan. Most Singaporeans now spend practically their entire working lives paying off their 30-year housing loans. This high investment in property leaves less disposable income for consumption and other investments. The Workers' Party believes that the prices of new HDB flats should not be pegged to the resale market price and then discounted. Instead, the prices of new flats should be pegged to the median incomes of Singaporean households who can qualify to buy those HDB flats. This will ensure that new flats are always affordable to the majority of Singaporeans. The price of new HDB flats should be affordable enough to enable most lessees to pay off their loans in 20 years rather than 30. The development cost of HDB flats should be made fully transparent, so the public knows whether HDB is profiting or making a loss on the construction of each flat. Many Singaporeans who sell their flats and cannot afford to buy another flat are left stranded for long periods of time because of strict HDB rules on rental housing. The criteria to qualify for public rental housing should be flexible to cater for families who are financially strapped. The number of flats available under the public rental scheme should be increased significantly to cope with increasing demand. And lastly, the HDB's lease buyback scheme has seen a very low take-up rate since its inception. The eligibility criteria for the scheme should be reviewed to extend it to more households who may be in financial need. It should be extended to lessees of 4-room or larger flats so that more elderly people will benefit from the scheme. In addition, HDB should provide better public education on this complex scheme so that there will be a higher take-up rate among our elderly. Thank you very much.